Sophie for Hit the Floor. I'm at Universal HQ with Matthew Koma. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Now, you played in Hoxton yesterday. How did they treat you?
It was cool. It was our first time getting to headline a show in London, so it was fun. It was a good area, and it was kind of a fun place to scope around before and after the show, and the show was great, and luckily people showed up. So it's always a plus, and also it was a plus that it wasn't just a kitchen, as the name would suggest. So it was great. It was really fun.
And did I see that Far East movement came to see you? Did they?
They did, yeah. We toured together a bunch last year, and we worked on their single "Turn Up the Love" together, actually on tour. So they randomly were in town and stopped by and showed some love. It was cool.
Did you go out partying afterwards?
You know what, they did, and those guys are legend. Yeah.
Are they lunatics?
I don't know if I'd call them lunatics, but something along those lines.
On the cusp, maybe.
On the cusp, on the verge.
Yeah. Now, your new video, it kind of shows that you've got a sense of humour and you don't mind a bit of injecting a bit of fun. But what are you like on stage in terms of witty stage banter? Are you any good at the chat between the songs and joking with the crowd?
I think in general, I'm a bit of a sarcastic, somewhat cynical person at times. So it's hard for that to not come across, be it in stage or ideas for videos, or I think even songwriting to a certain degree. There's always a little bit of an element of getting to use that as an excuse to code a message with something else. So I don't know. It's always hard to try to figure out how you're perceived versus just kind of hearing what people think or how they see it or what they compare it to. But I think I've kind of been the same since I was like a little kid and just causing little pranks for the joke. So
in terms of like how you perform on stage and the things you say, do you practice it secretly? Do artists actually think, I'm going to say that after track 2, I'm going to do this, or is it really spontaneous?
I think for me at least there's always a really big level of it being spontaneous, but I think you're conscious of, you're putting on a show, right? So I think you're conscious of flow and conscious of kind of at least points that make sense for you to speak or points that make sense to connect. And as an opening act too, because you have such a short period of time to kind of win an audience over, I think you're a lot more conscious of what your connections are and when you can make those fluid enough to speak and stop for a second, but for not to be long enough to get in the way of the 5 songs you get to play or anything. So, you know, and like last night was cool because we got to headline a show and it's a little bit more lax and it's a little bit more conducive to being able to tell a story or speak about a song for a second. But in general, I don't know, I find it hard to necessarily stick to like the same thing every night, but I think you start to fall into a bit of a groove where you find something that works and it's entertainment and people come to be entertained. So if it makes people laugh in Belfast, then you're going to try it again when you get to Dublin, you know, to a certain degree. But I think you're always kind of refining it or making it appropriate for whatever city you're in.
Now, you've said that Paris is kind of a second home to you. Do you think there's a chance that London might become the third home to you, that you might want to come here more and more?
I love London. I think Paris, London, maybe Amsterdam too, are just cities that I've gotten to spend maybe a little bit more time in than other places in Europe. So I think naturally there's just a bit more knowledge of places to go and things to do and a bit more understanding of the lay of the land. And I think like any city, it's nice when you know where you're walking or know where you're taking a cab to without just having to show the phone with the address and whatnot. You could actually sort of know and tell someone where you're at. So yeah, I think just being in London as much as I've been lately and being in Paris, they just start to feel a little bit more like the checkpoints on a tour, especially when you're out for a while and kind of in a lot of foreign places. It's nice to have places that feel a little bit more familiar.
Now, when you're on the road before, I think you said it really changed the shape of how your album went. You started finding a new way of writing or something. Did you have an epiphany on this tour with Ellie Goulding? Did any new songs emerge or any new styles or anything?
Yeah, I think in general, anytime you're exposed to a different artist when you're on tour with somebody like Ellie, I think you start to study almost, not even on purpose necessarily, but just to kind of study what they do and why they do it that way and how it works for them. And I think you always take a piece of that with you the next time you sit down and write a song. It's always like, well, what would that person do, or how can I kind of take a page from what they do if you're a fan of it, of course. And I think it always influences the style. For me personally, I'm always writing a lot on the road, and I'm always kind of working on other songs or collaborations with other writers and other producers. So it's a constant flow. So for me to be able to experiment with something like that and kind of constantly try to up the next thing or find the next level for myself, it's an easily erased a mistake or a road I can go down for 10 seconds and see if it's a sincere shirt to wear for the day. But yeah, I think in general everything really influences the direction of the art. Being able to play for people and seeing how people respond to songs or how people don't respond to something is huge, and even seeing what they respond more to, it starts to kind of direct you to paying more attention about the things about yourself or about your writing or about your songs that are working. And that's something that you really can't get outside of really doing it and playing for people. And it's a very old school way of thinking, I think, to road test a song, but I think that mixed with the influence of other artists and just the headset you're even in on a tour, just listening to music in the van or in a bus or whatever, it's just you're constantly kind of open to it.
Did anything surprise you about the way Ellie performs, the way she gets ready, or how she acts backstage in terms of whether she writes on the go or anything? Did you learn anything new about her?
Yeah, I think in general, she's one of the few artists that, in my opinion, has successfully bridged the gap between contemporary music and pop music that's based on production models that are constantly being pushed forward, but she's still based in a classic school of songwriting, which I think is a really rare thing to find in a pop artist. And I think seeing her show, it's even more driven home that it's a real artist, and though she appeals to a pop audience and though she has songs that are connecting at radio, she's one of the reminders of that pop music doesn't have to have this negative connotation that it's disposable. It can just mean that it's popular, which is the definition, right? And I think that's something about her that I had always assumed based on her records and based on hearing some of the singles, but being able to see her live show and how her audience connects. I mean, there was a show in Poland where literally kids knew words to every single song of hers, and to see it mean that much to those people means it's successful on so many levels, just successful and just being great. So I think that was a confirmed assumption.
In terms of collaborations, you've worked with people from all different genres, but you've always said that they're friends, like the Twice as Nice guys, Sam, Tim, Swedish House Mafia. But would you ever work with people that maybe you didn't gel with to see if it brought out new things, or people that you didn't perhaps admire in the obvious way?
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, I've been fortunate. Someone like Tim, who I wrote and produced most of my record with alongside the Twice as Nice guys, we'd been friends for years and just never really worked together because it was a friendship first. So in a case like that, it was the exact opposite. But a lot of people like Sam or the Swedish House guys or Lesso or Zed, we met first as kind of collaborators, or because people thought it would be a good idea for us to work on something together, or thought that there could be a unique song born of an introduction. But in general, a lot of those relationships were music-based first before they kind of morphed into friendships. And I think you start to bond when you get in a room with somebody, you're creating something, you're creating art, right? It's a unique thing to sit in a room with somebody, and by the time you leave, you have something that you created together and you worked on together. And then take it a step or two further where those songs start to connect at a point where people know them and people know the words and it means something to them. It's an even more bonding experience. Like Anton and Zed and I went to Japan because Spectrum is hitting there, and that was like, we're in Tokyo and we're playing a huge TV show, and that's crazy because we sat in a room one day and just wrote the song, So I think in general, I'm always open to collaborate with everybody, but I think it's a hard thing to not have some sort of a bond or connection when you're working with people who I think sincerely come from a place of loving music and are passionate about it, because it is a special thing. You're creating art,
How are you when people perhaps say, I don't really like that idea, I'm not sure about that melody, or I don't think that sounds good? Are you good at taking that on, or do you kind of go on the defensive?
It totally depends on what the purpose is. I think when I'm working on other people's records, I'm a little bit more open to understanding what they're looking to accomplish and trying to help guide that versus trying to just be the voice of it, because if that was the case, then it would be my record. When it comes to my record, I'm a bit more closed off as far as really caring what anybody thinks, because I feel like the license that I'm giving myself by working on other people's records and kind of playing ball in that respect, or being in that headset, is the balance of being able to go to the other side of it and kind of selfishly do what I want to do and do what speaks to me. And I think when you're making a record for yourself, that's the only justice you can really do for yourself, or even to a fan base if you're looking to create one, because you're asking them to subscribe to you. So if it's not coming from a place of complete purity and it being real and it being sincere, then it's not really a true representation. So I think the reason I'm more willing to do that with other artists is because they're looking to accomplish that too. So if something doesn't feel like it's appropriate for them, then the goal is for it to be, right? Because they're speaking to their audience. But when it comes to my stuff, I think I'm a lot more kind of just, it is what it is.
You want to be proud of it at the end of the day, and you've got to live with that for the rest of your life, haven't you?
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's all it is, right? I mean, no matter what happens with it, whether it succeeds in a massive way or it succeeds just in a way that you're proud of it, that you're living with that album, you're living with those songs. And I think that's also why I'm always constantly creating, is because I don't necessarily always want to be pigeonholed with the last thing I did. I like being able to create and let it go and move on to the next thing. So.
And I want to talk about having to do a remix for Bruce Springsteen. Now, he's one of your heroes. Was it an instant yes, or did you think, can I cope with this? Can I handle the pressure?
It was crazy. Ron and Yellow, who produced his last record, Wrecking Ball, who I'd done some work with previously, gave me a call, and he was like, look, we're looking to do kind of a radio mix for a song. Would you want to be involved and come by and work on it with me? And it was just like, of course. I lived down the block from Ron, so we cruised over, and yeah, before you know it, it was like, okay, we're just digging in and producing a Bruce song. And I think I'd immediately get out of the headset that it was Bruce, and it was just like, all right, well, I treat this like any other artist, and I treat it, serve the song, and if he likes it, great, and if he doesn't like it, at least I know that I'd do what I assumed he would do, or he'd want somebody to do and bring to the table. He wouldn't be reaching out to somebody else if he didn't want it to be outside of the obvious wheelhouse or the obvious box. So I felt like, all right, well, I'm going to go for it, and luckily he liked it, so yeah.
What was that wait like, though, when you were finding out what the response was? What, were you just pacing up and down the room, or what was going on?
It was like 3 weeks where we hadn't heard anything, and it was kind of like, I don't know. You know what? It was a cool experience. It was rad to work on it, so whatever happens, happens. And then Ron called me. He's like, John Landau called, and they love it, and they're putting it out, and the video's coming out. And I was like, yeah, it was gnarly. I remember the first time I heard it on the radio in Los Angeles was one of those, like, moments of, I don't care how many records I sell, I don't care what happens. That's one of those... That's what matters. I grew up being a fan, and that's one of the reasons I play music, and I got to be a part of something that's now exists,
Tick, life box sort of thing.
Yeah, total check the box, yeah.
So I read that you also want to work with First Aid Kit, and I'm guessing Elvis Costello might be on the to-do list. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm constantly surprised by who and what I like working on, because I don't think I ever would have even thought about collaborating with DJs or producers or writers in the EDM world, and that was a bit of a happy accident that led to not only successful songs but also really influencing my process and kind of influencing where I wanted to even take my record. So I think the options are endless,
Exciting times.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, in terms of social media, it's kind of allowed you to get singles out whenever you've wanted, but how much of yourself do you give away on that? Do you hold back in terms of your personal stuff and your emotions, for example, or do you just let the fans have everything?
I think in general, I'm a bit all over the place. So there's times where I'm really on top of it, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm in Europe, and I want to snap a bunch of photos and show people. And I think other times I'm just so in creative mode or whatever that it's a completely different headset. So I think I'm back and forth a little bit with that. I mean, I'm definitely really interested in being able to share mostly the creative process and the experience with the fan base, but always a little bit different than personal. I think the most representative expressions of the personal side of it are the songs and are the music. So even to just kind of keep that process really sincere, I think almost takes a little bit of cutting off from that, for me at least.
I think I've got to wrap it up now, but just one last question. I think I read that you were about 9 when you wrote your first song, but did you ever imagine another career if the music thing didn't work out? Did you allow yourself to think of, other alternatives?
I think whenever music got really stressful, I'd always think about being a history teacher, and then after about 3 minutes of that fantasy, the reality always set in that I'd actually have to be somewhere at a certain time, and went back to music. So
not into structure then?
Not so much, no. Song structure sometimes, yeah.
Okay, well, have fun in Belgium. I think that's where you're off to next, isn't
Germany. We're going to Germany, I think. Actually, no, you're right. We're going to Brussels for the 11th, yes. She knows my schedule better than I do.
Okay, well, have a good time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.